Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you another review, and as you can tell from up there, it's another entry in childhood favorites. And it's a film that I had the pleasure of revisiting last night. Film I haven't watched in a couple years, just haven't felt the urge to watch it, not since I first got this film on DVD. It of course is, as you can tell from the title up there, Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. That's the DVD. It's one of the DVDs that, I have in these big cases, and fuck, a bunch of them just fell. Actually, it was just one. Sorry about that. Just moved it out of the wrong angle. But if I had the DVD case, if it was in the back, I would have shown that. But DVD's there, so. Anyway, now, funny thing about this is that this is one of those series I did see out of order. Because I saw the second film first, and then I saw the first one. Because I will be bold enough to say I never had heard of Austin Powers until the second film came out after its theatrical release. Because my older brother got the VHS copy of The Spy Who Shagged Me for Christmas. We watched it. I'm like, okay, I don't understand that. So, first part, some of the references to the previous film I didn't get at first. And I enjoyed the second film, which is going to probably be the next review or the next childhood favorites, depending on how I upload these. Anyway, I don't remember exactly how long later, but I think it was sometime the next year. This film was on Fox, and you guys know that I usually don't like watching them on this, but this is before I'd even come up with that rule, so I'm like, I might as well watch it. I watched most of it, but fell asleep, and I would watch that partially, so I got the concept of the film, and then, not that long later, it was on a different channel, so I watched it there, loved it, and then a few years after that, I managed to get it in my collection, and I've loved it like that, and then I just haven't watched it for a while, until revisiting last night, and it's still a comedy that holds up. It has a 7.0 on IMDb, and on Rotten Tomatoes it has a 75% with the audience and a 70% with the critics, which I can agree with those scores, and here's the consensus. A light and goofy comedy which provides laughs largely due to performances and screenwriting by Myers. I will agree with that. That with comedy, part of it is the writing and part of it is the performance of the actors. Because if you give the actors crappy material to work with, no matter how good their performance is, you're probably not going to laugh unless they add stuff in it to make you laugh. And vice versa. Even if you have the best material, if you don't have the best actors, the comedy's not going to fall flat because depending on what type of comedy, you might not believe it. Like if it's slapstick comedy, you might not believe the reactions. If it's more dialogue comedy, you won't believe the delivery, and you might just chuckle at it because you do find the dialogue funny. Here you get that even balance, that good performances from the actors and great writing. And of course, most of the jokes in this movie are spoofing spy movies, mostly Bond movies, which that's kind of the charm of the film, especially since, at least in this film, it's more self-aware than the sequel is. Or should I say sequels, because the sequels, it's less obvious. It's obvious what they're making fun of, but they don't acknowledge it, which is part of the charm of this film. And most of the Bond films, it's spoofed, so the early Sean Connery ones, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, among others. And it even also spoofs the original Casino Royale, which was a spoof also. And then it spoofs other things, like What's Up Tiger Lily, among other stuff. And I think there's maybe spoofed something else, but I think there's also a spoof of Demolition Man in there, because isn't the reanimation sequence in there kind of similar to how it is in Demolition Man? It's been a long time since I've seen Demolition Man, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just what it seems to remind me of. And also they choose the appropriate music for each sequence, other than the movie's actual score. Like The Look of Love is used appropriately, ironic since it was in that Casino Royale movie. I Touch Myself by the Divinals, good song for a dance sequence. Secret Agent Man, perfectly used in the scene it's in. Secret Agent Man. These boots are made for walking. Interesting choice for that scene. And What the World Needs Now Is Love. An interesting choice as well. Now the movie was directed by Jay Roach. And no, I'm not making that last name up. And he also directed the two sequels. Other than that, he also directed Mystery Alaska, Meet the Parents, and Meet the Fockers, Recount, Dinner for Schmucks, and The Campaign. Now, I haven't seen Meet the Parents all the way through, so I can't comment on that. I've seen bits and pieces of it. It looks like a fun movie. I have seen Meet the Fockers all the way through, and I did enjoy that film. Probably enjoyed the first two Austin Powers movies more, but we'll just see. Mystery Alaska I haven't seen. Game Change or Dinner for Schmucks I haven't seen. The Campaign, you guys know I did a review of that last year. I thought it was an amusing film, but not Roach's best work when it comes to, you know, laughs, but it's still a good little satire of American politics. But there's probably better satires out there. But anyway, the screenplay was written, according to this, entirely by Myers, and part of it is there because the dialogue could be better, you know, at least interaction-wise, but it works for this type of satire. And it shows that Myers was at least knowledgeable of what he was satirizing. And also how some of the characters are written. Like, probably one character, how he's written, that I will point out is Scott Evil. Especially since he kind of contrasts with his father, Dr. Evil. They're kind of foils. Where Dr. Evil is more playing by how the traditions in these type of spy movies, how their villains go, you know, oh, we're going to do that, I'm going to do that. Scott Evil's is like a stand-in for the audience, like, hey, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be doing that? Why don't you do that? That makes more sense. How about, no, Scott, I'm doing it this way. I've been a frickin' evil doctor for 30 frickin' years. Cut me some frickin' slack. Like that. And of course it goes with the dialogue. Well, you're just gonna do that? You could get away. No, I'm not gonna actually witness him dying. I'm just gonna assume it all went to plan. What? And then, of course, earlier, oh hell, what do we do? Just do what we always do. Hijack some nuclear explosives and hold the world hostage. Works for a Cold War era villain, I guess. Now, the plot of the movie, I guess, you know, I haven't gone into much of the plot yet. It starts in 1967. We start by introducing Dr. Evil, which, in a nice little spoof of the character, Bluefold, I think it is, or Billfold, whatever his name is. You guys know the character that Donald Pleasance played in one of the Bond movies, which Dr. Evil's look is also based on that version. We don't see him until after the time skip. Anyway, he decides to set a trap for his nemesis, British spy Austin Powers. It fails in actually killing him, but Dr. Evil escapes and cryogenically freezes himself. Austin volunteers to be put into cryostasis to be revived if and when Dr. Evil returns. 30 years later, in 1997, Dr. Evil returns in his big boy. And that's an original one, in case you're wondering. And so they unthaw Austin, and now he has to stop Dr. Evil while at the same time trying to fit in. But of course, you know, he's from the late 60s. It's going to be a little difficult at first. Which that's where part of the humor with Austin's character comes from. It's not only him doing spy stuff and also making fun of the spy movies, but it's also him trying to fit in the 90s, which of course big culture clash, and it also adds to some fish out of water humor. Austin trying to fit in and all that, and also trying to change his mentality, especially with his love interest, because you know, free love and all that in the 60s, you know, Austin's used to that, so it's going to cause a little bit of clash with Vanessa Kensington, played by Elizabeth Hurley, the love interest. And I guess that's what it kind of makes their romance semi-believable, is because you can understand there is an attraction there, but the conflict is their differing views. But you can tell throughout the film that Austin does learn his lesson and is going to at least try, which I guess is some of the little charm of their romance. Now, of course, as the plot goes on, you know, Austin's going to have to try to uncover Dr. Evil's plan and foil it, which his plan in this movie is to send a nuclear warhead to the center of the Earth and cause every volcano on Earth to erupt. Well, I'm not sure that would actually cause all the volcanoes on Earth to erupt. Might cause the Earth to explode, but it's an interesting plan, and it kind of fits for a spoof of this type of movie. And you can actually imagine a Bond villain actually doing this. Mr. Bond, I'm going to cause every volcano on Earth to erupt. More so in the classic films, probably nowadays it wouldn't fly, because of how audience views have changed and all that. But it'd be interesting. It's for a spoof, it works. And of course, some of the characters are even, other than, as I meant, like with Dr. Evil, some other characters are spoofs of existing characters. Like Random Task is an obvious spoof of Odd Job, even their name and what he does. Although, in retrospect, the whole throwing a shoe thing is actually kind of funny. Is a little funnier now, because think of it. Especially with Austin's line, "Who throws a shoe? Honestly." Well, apparently in the Muslim world, they throw shoes at you if they want to disrespect you. You know, bush dodging. Yeah, see, Gohan, even Bush can dodge. And number 2, spoof of right-hand henchman, Frau Farbissina. I'm not entirely sure what she's supposed to be spoofing, but it kind of works. Basil Exposition, you know, a spoof of Bond's, you know, helpers. I don't remember what their name is. I think it's like Q and W, whatever it is. And of course, obviously, since his last name, you can tell what his job is. Exposition. Which that's actually a joke I never really caught until more recently. Because I guess I wasn't really familiar with the word exposition, but now rewatching it, I'm like, exposition. And then, of course, a character whose name tells you the pun. Alata Fagina. Which I've actually found out something interesting, that if you actually were to go by Italian pronunciations, her last name would be pronounced Fagina. Which, if they had done it that way, it still would have been funny, because it'd been like, Fagina? And I'm like, what? Or they could have actually kept the V in, and it would have been even funnier, but for how they do it, it's still funny. And, of course, other characters doing what they will. Now, directing-wise, Roach, he films it very well. Actually, you could tell, it does kind of feel from how he used the camera. It feels like it's satirizing what it is satirizing. And he gets good performances out of the actors. Of course, some of them, like Myers, I don't think he really needed that much help because he was also the writer, so he knew what the characters needed. And also, you know, him being on Saturday Night Live and all that, he's used to doing type of roles like this. George S. Clinton needed an interesting score, even though the main Austin Powers theme was done by Quincy Jones. I'm going to check to see what the name of it is again. Soul Bossa Nova. Bossa Nova? Chevy Nova? Couldn't resist. Now, come to the actors. Mike Myers is Austin Powers / Dr. Evil. He did a very good job with the dual roles, and it's interesting how they actually filmed it, and it makes me wonder exactly how they organized the day's shoots. Did they like do Austin Powers one day, then the next day they did Dr. Evil for those same scenes, and then just alternate? Or like do scenes like that, or did they do all of Austin's first and do all of Evil's? That's one thing I'd actually like to find out. But how they use stand-ins is very creative. Like for one scene where Dr. Evil's supposed to be in the front part of the camera, you could see that Austin stand-in and Vanessa are supposed to be in the background, but they're out of focus. Interesting, especially since afterwards it does a little quick cut for a little joke. And you could tell that he did approach each character differently. Austin, you know, definitely making fun of the old spy movie leads. Of course, it adds another thing, is in that most of those old spy movie leads were very attractive, whereas Austin, even though Mike Myers, I wouldn't say he's classically handsome, but you know, passable, I guess you could say, or I don't know what number I'd ascribe to him, but adding in some of the makeup, like with the teeth and all that, lowers his attractiveness a little bit, but I guess that's part of the joke, is that despite that, women find him irresistible. Maybe it's how he holds himself and all that. And how he approached the character works, especially with the fish out of water humor and battle of his character in the film. Now, Dr. Evil, he approached in a very interesting manner. Of course, everyone knows him. Throw me a freaking bone here, you know, all that. And it's very interesting. As a villain, he kind of comes across as like a spoiled child that whines whenever he doesn't get his way, but I guess that kind of works with it. Especially since you combine it with the fact he doesn't realize that he's making mistakes by doing stuff like doing the typical spy movie villain thing, you know. Put them in an easily escapable situation about involving a very elaborate and exotic death, for example. Or sending incompetent henchmen that the hero will be able to easily dispatch, like Patty O'Brien. They're always after me, Lucky Charms. Elizabeth Hurley did a very great job as Vanessa Kensington, Austin's love interest. Like I mentioned before, you believe their chemistry. At first, of course, you know they're gonna be really combative because of the differences in times and viewpoints and all that, but as they work together and all, they warm up, and then you believe the romance as you see the attraction start, and you see the hurt from one scene, and then you believe the forgiveness, and you would believe them eventually hooking up in the end. That's all I'm going to leave it at. Seth Green as Scott Evil, he did a good job because, as I mentioned before, his character, at least in this film, was supposed to be a stand-in for the audience, especially when being the foil for his father, like, wait a minute, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And his performance actually fit that, and you could tell that him and Dr. Evil sort of have a minor combative chemistry, that, you know, that they don't really like each other that much, but they're related, so it's like, you know, you're my dad, so I have to care for you a little bit. It's like that. And he does kind of feel like he's written as a Generation X type character at times, which I think adds to it a little bit, especially with Dr. Evil not used to this. Like, that's how you like to live your life. You know, that scene and all that. Of course, it changes a little bit within the next films, but that's next film. I'll talk about it then. Robert Wagner was perfect casting for number 2. I cannot think of any other actor off the top of my head that could have filled this role just as perfectly. You know, works as the secondary henchman, but also as a plot twist later in the movie, you believe that he would be that, I won't say angry is the right word, but fed up with Dr. Evil's crap, and like getting real tired of your shit, man, all that. And so it's believable. Sad though that he's hardly ever used in the next 2 films, but number 2, it kind of makes, the second film, it makes sense why. In the third movie, he's basically just standing there and only has the lines of dialogue in the first part of the movie, but here he shows his stuff as a character well. Mindy Sterling as Frau Farbissina, perfect casting as well. Her yelling and all that can get slightly annoying, but it doesn't bother me because it's kind of a character quirk. And also it's funny that it, whenever she yells, it like even causes Dr. Evil to wince. And of course you believe that Dr. Evil has a friendship with her, maybe a minor one or whatnot. It's more probably compatriotism of anything. Michael York as Basil Exposition, another perfect casting. He fits this type of character, this WQ type character. And also you can tell he has a little back and forth with Austin, that they've known each other for a long time. Long time, as you find out in the third movie, in fact. But here it's interesting, and if there's any one scene that I have to mention, it's the scene where Austin hits his mother. You got a lot of explaining to do. That scene just makes me crack up his reaction. It's believable if some guy just hit your mother for a stupid reason. Fabiana Udenio as Alata Vagina. Perfect casting, good on the eyes, especially during the scene where it's her and Austin in the hot tub. Acting wise, she's just there, but I think she kind of fits the type of character is there, so I think it was intentional. Will Ferrell as Mustafa. Now this is an casting choice that I never noticed when I first saw the movie. I did not realize this is Will Ferrell. Then in later watching, I'm like, why does this guy look familiar? Look it up. That's Will Ferrell. Watch the movie again. Hey, it is Will Ferrell. As Mustafa, the voice he uses is slightly archetypal / stereotypical, but I think it works in this case. You know, going for a spoof, so it's probably spoofing that. He's only in a handful of scenes, but it works, especially since it adds one of the jokes that is repeated in the next film, but it works both times. Hello up there. I'm alive, but I'm very badly burned. That's all I'm going to say about it, but it does give me the smile. Mimi Rogers as Vanessa's mother for the few brief parts that she's in the movie. She does a good job. Joe Son, or Son, however you pronounce it, as Random Task. He did a very good job. He doesn't have any lines of dialogue, but he did a good job just standing there being a tough Asian guy. Especially with his fight at the end with Austin. It was kind of funny. And the whole shoe throwing thing, perfect. Paul Dillon as Patty O'Brien. He's only in a few scenes and has a few snippets of dialogue, but it works. Especially since his character is made fun of because of Lucky Charms. Maybe it's the hourglasses, I don't know. Carrie Fisher even has a brief role in the movie, which I think is kind of cool as a therapist. I think Tom Arnold as a cowboy. And even Charles Napier has a role in this movie as Commander Gilmore. Very interesting. Even though they give him the wrong freaking uniform, but hey, probably all they had. Actresses that played the fembots did a good job with there. According to this, Priscilla Presley's in the movie, but it doesn't say who she plays. Christian Slater was in the movie as a security guard, and it's a security guard number 2, so I don't know which one that is. Maybe one of the ones that ran, I don't know. I know another scene with him was cut. Clint Howard has a small role as one of the Air Force radar guys. Interesting. He also reprises his role in the next 2 movies, but again, you could debate whether it's the same character or not. Now, in conclusion, Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery is a fun comedy. Like I said, there are some better comedies out there, but For what it's spoofing and all that, it does fit how they executed it. It's hard for me to say if this or the second one is my favorite. Probably in the next film, once I've watched the second one again, I'll be able to answer that. But it's a film I definitely recommend. I think during its theatrical run, it should have made more money. It was made for $16.5 million and only made $67 million, almost 68, which is a decent size gross for that, but it should have made a little bit more. I'm actually glad it did make back its money, because it did deserve to at least have one sequel. Granted, it's a film you don't really need a sequel to, but how they did it, from what I remember, interesting. I do find it funny that the sequel made in its opening weekend more than the first film made in its entire run. Well, I guess people really loved the film when it was shown on TV and in theaters and all that. My rating for Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, 4 out of 5. If you haven't seen it, which this is one of those films from the 90s, I'm like, even 16 years later, you haven't seen it, what? I definitely recommend you give it a watch.